Hello F11 members, and welcome to the June edition of the Chasing the Light online magazine. And in the fundamentals of post-production video tutorial this morning, I'd like to take you through the processing of this image. It's a pretty simple task, this one, not very complex, but I think there's some interesting things to be done and reinforced. Okay, so let's start with this shoot, and I've imported it into Lightroom and opened up the images. Already, as you can see, I have the metadata has been put into the image, embedded as at the import stage. There you can see my copyright information is all there. So what I need to do now is just select which pictures I want to work on. And you can see I spent the morning hanging around this particular alleyway in Salvador, waiting as various people walked through my frame, and now I want to decide which image is the best. Before I proceed, there's just a few things that we can do in Lightroom to just tidy up the workspace. If I just hover my cursor over this arrow here and just click that, I can give myself just a bit more room to look at the images with a less cluttered window there. And again, at the top there's another arrow there, and that just gives me just a nicer workspace. I can get that taskbar back by clicking on that arrow there and there. But for now, let's just simplify matters by just stripping it down to the pictures. So you can see as how I worked the shoot, and there's this guy walking through the frame there. If I just double click on that picture there, it brings it up. It changes the view from grid view to loop view, so I see the image full screen, or near enough full screen. And I can see it even larger by clicking on these arrows here on the right of the frame, so that if I want to, I can just look at that image with nothing else there to confuse the issue. So that was the start of the shoot, and I think it was I was aware that there was potential there. I'm just going to double click to go back to grid view, and then various people walked through the frame. I think this image here has potential with the guy walking into the frame with his cart, but what really I liked was actually I stuck it and I worked the location trying to get the best possible image I could, and I was rewarded by this situation with these girls running through the frame, which I think there's a lot of energy to this picture. I quite like the feel to it. So these are the ones I'm going to concentrate on. Okay, so I just double click to go back to library view, and there are a sequence of 4 frames here with them running through the frame. So I'm just going to select those 4. And now if I come down here, and you can see I'm hovering my cursor over this tab down here which says survey view. So if I click on that, it just brings up those 4 images that I can now compare and choose the best one. And again, if I just click on these arrows at the side of the window, I've got a very simplified screen now with those 4 images next to each other, and I'm able to choose the best image. And looking at them like this, it's now clear to me which is the best one. This one has got the 2 girls in the frame there, one's in front of the other, a bit of a confused composition. This frame here, that has some nice energy to it, but what I really like is this frame here. The body shape of that girl with her hair streaming out behind her against that white background makes for a very strong arrangement, and the energy also of the second girl following her, everything's right. And then the 4th frame here, that's still pretty good, but you can see she's against that confusing backdrop of the door, and it's not really got that kind of energy that this picture here has. So that's the one I'm going to go with. So to help me select the best image, the ones that are clearly not are in the running, I can then just click on the box, the cross bottom right there, to narrow the selection down, and I've now got the 3 images here. And if I look now, I'm going to rule this one out of the equation as well, and I'm now down to just these 2 images here, and it's clear to me which one is the best, this one here. So now if I right click on that and go to set flag and just click on the flagged, it's flagged that image, and that's my pick. I can now go back to grid view and get the tabs up and move on to the processing of this picture. So now there it is, the image is flagged in grid view. I tend to get rid of the images that have not made the cut. There's just no point in keeping them, so I'm just going to select those 3 similars, all of which are really, in fact, these ones down the bottom as well. There's one clear best image, and the rest are not as good, so I only want the best, so I'm now just going to delete those images. So if I just hit the delete button there, it comes up with me, and I'm going to delete those 7 images from the disk and from the Lightroom catalog. People often think that's a bit severe, but really, what's the point of hanging on to the also rans? Okay, now I'm just going to go into the develop module, and we're going to work on how I'm going to post-produce this image. So the first thing that strikes me about this picture is it's pretty well composed, but the verticals are leaning over backwards, and that, with such an architectural picture like this, is distracting. You can see the edges of these doorways here. Because I angled the view of the lens up a bit, you can see up here I'm using the 24 to 70 mm lens with a 35 mm focal length. So I'm going to just tidy all that up, and what I can do is use this really neat thing in Lightroom 5. I find it very, very useful. Is I'm going to come down here and in the lens corrections select basic, and then down here there's a tab called vertical, and it's going to just straighten all my verticals for me. And look at that. That is really quite handy, isn't it? And now I'm just going to go back up here and crop the image slightly, because there's just a little bit of untidiness here on the right of the frame I'm not happy with. It's okay here on the left, so I'm just going to bring in this right hand edge. And just to recap on that, if you see up here, this key here, that's my aspect ratio. If I click that on and off, it's locking and unlocking the aspect ratio. With it locked, I can alter the size of the image, but it will keep that 2:3 aspect ratio, which is sometimes what I want to do. But then again, there's no law saying I have to keep that aspect ratio, so I'm going to hit Control Z, and it's undoing that crop rectangle, and I'm now going to just unclick the lock bar there, and that enables me to alter the shape of the image, to crop the image to suit without being wedded to the 2:3 aspect ratio. So I've just brought that in on the right, just a touch there, just to tidy up that right hand margin. I also feel that this image would really benefit from being a little bit more of a letterbox shape. This area down the bottom of the frame is just somewhat of a dead area. When I was shooting that, I thought that at the time. So I'm now just going to crop in a touch to about there, and I'm happy with that, and I click on done. Okay, so the next thing I do, as with all images, is start moving down through the adjustments. in Lightroom, starting at the top here with the color. As usual, I'm not going to do anything to the white balance of the image. It was shot on daylight white balance as usual, and there you can see 5200 Kelvin. Not touching that at all. It's a perfectly acceptable white balance. Of course, if I wanted to, and if I was really concerned about having a totally neutral image with these whites being completely neutral, it would be a good option to use the white picker here. And if I just click on that now and move it over to a white area and click on that, it adjusts the white color balance to really neutralize the white there. As you can see, there's very little difference actually. But I'm actually not going to do that, so I'm going to go back to the history palette here and just move back to where I started. You know my attitude, this business of post-production, the less you do, the better. Okay, next thing I do is move down to, as usual, the white and the black point in the image. And as you can see here, I'm clipping a few blacks. And if I just hover my cursor up here over that particular part, that icon at the left of the histogram, it shows me over here in those doorways where I'm losing shadow information. But I think we need to be realistic here, quite frankly. Do I expect to see detail in the depths of that doorway there in Salvador in Brazil? Not really. It doesn't worry me one iota, those few clipped shadows, so I'm not going to do anything. As for the white point, well, there's a bit of a gap here on the right, and I can afford to just adjust my white points to make them look, those brilliant whites look a little bit more sparkling. So by holding down the Alt key and sliding the white slider to the right until I start to see the clipping appearing, it's just a little bit of an adjustment there, pretty subtle, but it has just lifted the image a little bit. It's just made those whites a bit crisper without the need of any biological washing powder. This picture was shot in hazy sunlight late morning in Brazil. It's quite contrasty to start with. I could of course come down here to the tone curve and experiment with using the Lightroom preset medium contrast image. I think it's probably just a bit too much contrast there. It's but I think a little bit would be applicable. So I'm going to do that manually, just as usual, by putting a very, very shallow S-curve into the tone curve there, just to give a touch of contrast. And really, all we've done so far has been very subtle, but it's bringing the picture to me. At this stage now, I'm just going to put in a touch of vibrance, about 12 I would say. Of course, if I go all the way over there, you can see how gruesome that gets. So yeah, I'm going to be very careful here and just put in a touch there. And really, I have not done much to this image at all, really. What I want to do now is use the grad tone here, just to add just a little bit of gradation here at the bottom of the frame. And I'm just going to click on that grad icon there and drag this up here. And what I want to do is just going to hold the composition in a touch. So much, you know, I want as little in there so that it's hardly noticeable, really. Just about that. And I'll click on done. And now, really, you know, that's about it. If I come down here to this area here, we're going to see the before and after views of this image. Not a huge amount of difference from the starting point, but I think you will see that there's been quite an improvement to the picture, really. It's just a little bit more sparkling. And all of this is this post-production game. It's really about subtlety. So now I go back to the loop view, and I have yet to adjust my sharpening, and as usual I'm going to use Lightroom's preset here, Sharpen Scenic. It's my starting point virtually all the time, And if I now go in tight on the image here and just see the effect of that sharpening, and it looks good to me. There's a bit of movement blur on these girls, as you'd expect with that kind of shutter speed. I'm not particularly worried about that. I come back out on that by clicking the image again. I need to adjust a little bit of masking, holding down the Alt slider, moving the masking slider to the right, just a touch of masking, as there is a lot of detail in this image, quite an architectural picture. And at this stage I would stand back, put the kettle on, have a cup of tea and a biscuit, and just ask myself, is that picture where I want it to be? And I think it is. And so now it's time to export. So I come up to my module here and go to the library module and go to export, and as usual I'm going to put it in a folder called processed. That's where all my images go as they work through the post-production workflow. And I'm going to select that folder. I'm going to put it in a subfolder which I'm going to call Salvador. I am going to rename that image to Salvador, keeping the file name. I want it to be a TIFF with ProPhoto RGB color space, in this particular case the widest gamut. It will be converted to Adobe later, but we'll stick with that for now. 16-bit per color channel. I do not want to resize. Resolution 300. Unclick this output sharpening box because that really, we've already adjusted the sharpening. No watermarking. And I'm going to ask Lightroom to open the image in Photoshop after I'm done. But really this image now is done. There's nothing more that needs to be done to it, and really processing it would take a lot quicker than it's done for me in this actual video. So I hope you'll learn from that, and in part 2 we'll be doing another image. See you there.